scene was Russell E. Diethrick Park, August 3rd, 2000. Eddie Feigner, the preeminent fast-pitch pitcher and the king of the King and His Court, regaled the crowd on his 55th year of barnstorming throughout the country. Clearly, Eddie Feigner, the king, continues a long history of barnstorming ball players.
Attendance during the war years suffered too, and in an effort to encourage more fans to attend games, team owners came up with several outlandish contests involving players, the winners receiving no more than a $100 war bond. After the war, the promotions continued, some with celebrities from outside baseball like Jesse Owens, who raced and barely beat George Case of the Cleveland Indians in 1946. In the early 50s, stars like Abbott and Costello would make occasional appearances at ballparks. Here, they're at a Boston Braves game, answering the question of, who's on first? In the 30s and 40s, it was not unusual to see players or coaches participate in comedy sketches for the newsreels. In this case, the foil is Benny Bengal of the Washington Senators. Comedy and baseball have had a long and entertaining partnership. Former pitcher Al Schacht, who was known as the Clown Prince of Baseball, appeared at 25 World Series, including the 1940 series at Tiger Stadium. When Schacht retired in the early 50s, it was Max Patkin who inherited the title of Clown Prince. Amazingly, Patkin performed not only before the game, but during it as a legitimate first base coach. Max Patkin.
When I do my routine, I try to do it between pitches. I usually have between 10 and 15 seconds. You'd be surprised what 10 seconds means to a Max Patkin on the coaching line. So it gives me a chance to go through that goofy thing of motion with my neck, my arms, my legs, just to make out I'm giving a sign to the batter. That would give me just enough time. All I needed was 8 to 10 seconds. Bing, 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 bump, boom, ba, that. And, you know, and when I looked at those days, I'm telling you, I was the dumbest looking thing you ever saw in that coaching line.
Eddie Feigner is the last of a breed of barnstormers. And we had the pleasure to interview Ed, together with his lovely wife, Ann, on August 3rd, 2000. Here is Eddie Feigner, the king of the King and His Court, life story. How did Eddie Feigner think about softball?
I was an orphan because of an in-house fathering a baby in an unwed situation. There was this man that was playing in the hay with two sisters. He married one and he had the other one pregnant. This is a quick synopsis of why it happened. I was wrapped up in a pink blanket and left at the back door of a hospital. And the father of that situation, he had 13 kids, 8 of them in school. He said, we just can't have this kind of embarrassment with the father of that baby being married to the other. Just can't have it. I could see his point now. It would work now. But back in those days, man, that's the end of the story. So it almost killed my mother because she got out of bed and tried to find me. And she almost died because of the hemorrhage because she just had this baby. So she lost contact with me from the very first. The doctor who delivered me died in a fire of his home the very next month. And I just disappeared. Well, the people that raised me, I met her in a hospital when I was a day old. She had midlife birth to a baby she named Marion Eugene, and to save the baby would have killed her. So they saved her and let the baby die, because it wasn't going to be a healthy baby anyhow at 52-year marriage. 52 years old pregnancy. So she was afflicted with what they call breast fever. And back in those days, the medical industry didn't know how to handle breast fever.
Right.
And they would give these hand pumps and keep the on. So the doctor one day says, this lady's not going to make it. What we needed is that little guy suckling her, because that would have kept the fever down.
Right.
And the nurse said, well, how about that little guy we brought in last night? And the doctor said, what are you talking about? He said, well, we got a little boy in last night. He said, run, get him. So anyhow, they brought me up there, and I nursed her, and within a week she was well. And then they were going to send her home, and they asked the doctor, what are we going to do about that little guy? And they said, we've named him already. His name is Merle Vernon. And he said, well, if someone comes to get him, we'll know where it's at, and might as well go on home. So she was so sick, she didn't go to church. She hadn't been to church for a year. Now this year-old baby is in her arms. She never told a single person in church that the other baby died.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have an official burial. They just put him out in the backyard because he wasn't fully, So ladies at the church, oh, isn't this a fine baby? And here she's proud that she had a baby that's this healthy at 52 years old. And so she never said, this is not my baby.
Right.
Until I grew up and found out there was bastards and stuff, and used to get a lot of fist fights. And when I was 10 or 12 years old, the professor at the college says, you know, you got an exceptional child. I want to check his IQ. And I had something over 150 IQ, and I learned to play a piano all by myself. I learned how to play a saxophone all by myself. The guy said, when you learn to play a stanza on this sax without making a mistake on the note, you can have the sax. And the next day he came back from school. I'm sitting there on the front step, and he said, what are you doing? I said, I want to play that thing for you. He said, you can't play it. He said, yes, I can. So I played Moonlight and Roses. He said, the sax is yours. So that's the way I was.
Amazing.
So I got up to show off for Mrs. King when we were at a Bible study, and the Bible study was with the German church and the English-speaking church because of Hitler in Europe. And the women from the German side want to be friends with the English-speaking side because of their husbands didn't get along.
Right.
If you're a German, you. So anyhow, I'm at that Bible study, and I get up in front to recite the Beatitudes or whatever it was. And after I got through, I came by Mrs. King to tell her I'm going to go outside and play, ask her if I could go outside and play. And a lady was sitting right to her left. And now we know it was my mother's mother. We call her Grossmutter. And she says to Mrs. King, oh, you must be proud of your son. And Mrs. King says, well, he's not our son. We got him at the hospital. No one wanted him. He was wrapped in a pink blanket. Grossmother had wrapped that pink blanket around me when they took me out of the house, and she lived for almost 15 more years and never told her daughters, I know where your son is, because her daughter had lived another life, married, happily going on. Mrs. King had nobody except this little boy, and Grossmother was going to take that idea and that knowledge to the grave.
In fact, you actually cut your grossmother
I
and
used to
mother's
cut her
lawn,
yard.
but they didn't know that they were related.
Isn't that something?
So,
What city was this, by the way?
College Place, Washington. It's a town of about 1,200 people.
Yeah.
And it's just a college town, Adventist college town. Sick people. I don't know. It's not a good say. It's not. They're fanatical, religious, like you never see. They don't wear lipstick. They can't dance. They don't wear brews. You don't even use perfume. I mean, they're supposed to be like they were in the Garden of Eden, pure, and you know, they don't eat meat and everything. Anyhow, that's another story. But through the process of checking the records, getting out of the Marine Corps with the disability, going to Grouse Mother and finding out that Naomi was still there. She was selling her home. I came over to see her. We had a dinner, spent 48 hours talking, and after that, she says, you can be anything you want, do anything you want, and I'll give you some money, and this house is yours. And I said, no, I didn't come for the house or the money, but I will take the car. And I said, I'm a ball player. And she said, well, you do what you want to do. So she sent me to college for a couple of years, and that's when the King's Court started.
We tried to get the word up to you before you started. You're 3 minutes ahead of time. It's 3:07. I got to warm up. Just a second. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome on behalf of the King's Court. I have a little arthritis on days like today. It hurts more than other days. We've got quite a turnout considering the fact that we've had bad weather. We remember to not sit there and ruin the whole thing worrying about the score. That's all been taken care of. Okay, soon you fellows take out of the field. We'll be ready to play. Thank you again.
Left-handed batter! Right. And ahead, but ahead! Oh, yeah. Right. One more time for the camera.
You were little, of how you decided that you liked softball.
Oh, well, by the time I was home from school after I'd been sick, I didn't go to the first and second grade. So by the time I'm 7 years old, I get well enough from having all the childhood diseases. I had about 8 of them, mumps and measles and whooping cough and scarlet fever and so on. I had a setback and a scarlet fever and almost died. And the nurse that taught the first and second grade was in charge of the first, second, and third grade. So she had 2 rows of kids in the first grade, 2 rows of kids in the second, and 2 rows of kids in the third grade. So I went back to school. Well, the very first day I was there, she had me over in the first grade. And she moved me over the other side of the room, the third grade. So the first grade of school I ever went to was my third grade. That year I met Meade Kinzer and Meineke and White. They were in 2 other different schools, but we lived 4 blocks from each other.
Wow.
And that's how it started. And by the time I got to be 9 or 10 years old, every time you brought up the fact that I was a little bastard or whatever it is, and the ball game, they couldn't foul it, let alone hit it. And,
That was a real incentive for you.
Oh, yeah. The only reason I became a good softball pitcher so that Bobby Blue couldn't pitch on the team.
Yeah.
And how about how you learned, you taught yourself, because you didn't have any men in your life, and there was no Little League, of how you threw rocks and practiced.
Well,
with balls.
Satchel Paige came through town. The first guy I ever saw pitch was Satchel Paige. He was with the Kansas City Monarchs. And like every kid, you go sneak in fence and get in there somehow. And I watched him throw, and I got a tennis ball, an old tennis ball, and I got out behind the barn, and I would pitch the game. I was Mel Allen. There he is, man on third and second, strike ball. You know, you did it. Right?
Everybody
Yeah.
did it.
Well, they don't do it
Kids
anymore.
don't do that
They
today.
don't do it anymore.
No, that's right.
But back in those days, you announced your own game. And then I got so good that I got a little older. I pitched in the what do you call it, the field day. They had college guys, high school guys, and the grade school. The 7th and 8th grade team played the college team, and we beat them.
No kidding.
And I pitched 2 baseball games and 3 softball games the same day, and they never scored in any of the 5 games. So by the time I got to be 13 or 14 years old, I went up to be around the guys that played good softball, and they pitched.
men.
Yeah, the men,
Yeah.
because they had no little league. And so I pitched batting practice because I could throw windmill like these touring teams,
Yeah.
like the Ghosts and so on. And all those guys were pitching was orthodox. And son of a gun, the 2 pitchers on our team, they were the Washington State champions. The 2 pitchers on my team in 1938 peeled out their elbows. They was riding on a bicycle, motorcycle, and they were racing each other, and they hit on this gravel road, and it wrecked their knees, their elbows, and they couldn't pitch in the state tournament. They were defending champions. And the sponsor was considering just withdrawing. And the catcher on our team says, why don't we take the kid? Let's at least show up.
Yeah.
Well, playing against guys that never saw a windmill,
Yeah,
they either walked or struck out. There was no hitting.
yeah.
And I won the state tournament when I was 14 and got back home, and I was barred for life. They wouldn't allow me to play. The only way I could play in the league was play center field.
They wouldn't allow him to pitch in his own hometown. If he had had a father, that would have never happened. Can you imagine your 13-year-old
What a
son,
disappointment, yeah.
who was because he was so good, they wouldn't let him pitch in his own hometown?
You mean that was the
You
reason?
wouldn't be able to do
Yeah.
that today, because he was so good.
They said if we have an 8-team league and they know you're pitching in that one team, we won't get any sponsors for the other 7 teams.
Oh.
So you can play center field and bat and all that. You can
Just
pitch.
because you were so good?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was good. By the time I was 14 years old, I could do everything I could do when I was 30.
Yeah.
I got my height at 6'1", and I could throw a ball right through a wall.
Yeah.
And I was strong as an ox because I had done all those things you do as a young boy. I carried the baled hay and then milked 32 cows. And,
Picking the peas.
yeah, all those things. You get strong milking
yeah.
the cows.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Well, I could do anything I wanted to with the ball, and I had perfect control. I had eyes that I have. Ted Williams and I have the same eye. It's called 10-20. It's twice as good as a regular eye. That's the reason why he could see a ball spinning coming out of the fingers of a baseball pitch. That's why he became such a hitter. Is he saw the spin on the ball when it left the pitcher's hand, not when it got out here, but back there.
When I first saw it played, it was called indoor ball. It's gone full cycle now, and they play a game called slow pitch. The problem is that no self-respecting father is going to teach his son slow pitch, so the next generation won't have that game to play either. I'm not knocking slow pitch. It's a lot better than jogging. Well, anyhow, by 1934, they organized the game and they pitched it with a wrist snap. Men like Al Lindy and Shifty Gears could throw the ball at 70 miles an hour. And from 32 feet, you couldn't hit it. Well, by 1939, the game became very popular. Lowell Thomas, who was a famous newscaster, told me that the 1939 Supreme Court for FDR had a softball team, the 9 men on the bench that were the team. Bob Ripley of Ripley's Believe It or Not had a team. He asked Lowell to put together an all-star group to play a game in charity at Madison Square Garden in '39. I golfed with Cannonball a couple of years ago, and he said this is a true story. He's about 86 years old now and still good health. He said when they got to Madison Square Garden, there sat Babe Ruth. The Babe came to bat 3 times and struck out 3 times in 9 straight pitches. And after the 3rd strikeout, the Babe took the ball away from the catcher and fumbled it up against the end of the building. And he turned to the crowd and said, "I just want to see if the damn thing could be hit." Well, by 1940, I came along into the game, and the game had started to speed up. There were several of us that could throw windmill. Now you'd have guys throw it in the middle of the wind-up and keep on winding up. You'd have guys throw it and then wind up. I saw Archie Windmill Hamlin throw this pitch so good that the batter would swing so late, when the catcher would throw it back, the batter would see it, thought he hit it, and took off for first. Now we have the wind-ups like the figure 8. The straight slingshot. The whip. The rewind. The spin with the rewind. I like that one. Now we were on the road about 5 years before we come to realize that you fans like to see tricks, but she wouldn't travel with us. My girl. So we started throwing tricks in the game like behind the back. Behind the back changeup. Softball team. I ended up striking those fellows all out, and I got Mays behind the back and Clementi between the legs. But it was a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed being out.
You started on a dare.
Yeah, well, that game, that's the way we say it started there. That isn't really true. We started over an insult.
Insult?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We played this Oregon State champion, and we were the Washington State champion, and the dam between Oregon and Washington on the Columbia River is the same state, so they were working on the same dam we were.
Right.
They just on the other end. And so we had a lot of money, and they had a lot of sponsorship, so they sponsored softball. The guys that had the construction company on Oregon side, and then our guys over on this side, Turling. And this particular one night, I wanted to pitch good, and we ended up striking everybody out. And I'd done that before, and through my life, I did it over 200 times. But this particular night, there was a smart mouth guy on the bench, and he called me something about my ancestors. Mm-hmm. And being an orphan, you could get a good fight of me. He called me a little bastard. And so I went over. Well, I was a basically Christian man, and I never did say very many bad things back in those days. I learned to do that when I was in the Marines, but at that time I was just trying to be nice, and I said, you know, it wasn't very hard to strike out 21 of your batters. They're not very good. I'd play with my catcher. I'd play with my catcher, but you'd walk us both. You know.
Right.
You can imagine playing this team, both guys would walk.
I know.
So
where would you be?
Anyhow, he said, you think you're so smart. You bring your shortstop, first baseman, and catcher down here, and we'll play you. I told you this story yesterday.
Yeah, right.
Well, what he had made up his mind right there is you have to have a short first and catcher to have a fourth person bat with the bases loaded. Mm-hmm. And that was in the end of the story. We beat him, and the next week, we got a call from Boise. We played them. Our gate was going to be $100, and they said, no, we were going to give you half the gate because it wouldn't be fair just to give you $100. We sold tickets. Well, they sold 25-cent tickets, and they had 4,000 people. Our half, 6,000 people. Our half of the gate at 25 cents a ticket came to $960. And we got back home that night, and I told the guys, I said, you know, if we played 5 or 6 games a week, 15 weeks during the summer from April to August, that'd be better than working.
Yeah.
Well, we've played to almost 39 million people.
Wow.
The king's gonna pitch blindfolded. I got one eye, and the umpire can't see. Good luck.
Man, Holzer, hit it!
That ought to be white with a red cap. By his face.
I told the king he was left-handed.
I don't need to wear a mask. Only sissies wear masks.
Not mentioning any names.
What happened in there now?
You didn't see what he just did?
The umpire?
Yeah, the umpire.
What did he do?
Just like this. I'll wear it now, Eddie. I got a better idea.
What's that?
Hey, Dave, will you catch for me, please? Hey, up! I wouldn't do that to him. Yes, Eddie?
I want to remind you, you have a guy on first base.
Yeah, I see him.
When he goes to second, you'll see north to third, and just keep going.
Well, if he goes all the way to third, I'll be waiting for him over there.
You're going to cover third,
I'll cover third.
I'll cover home.
I gotta see this.
Next day's Post Journal, a photo by Joe Liuzzo captured the moment and this unique pitching by the king, Eddie Feigner.
Is when it comes to impressing it. I was impressed only just to see how unimpressed they were.
Good answer.
You know, Gorbachev and Mousy Tongue. These are just dumb people. They got the public around them, and they're all scared of them.
Yeah.
And they talk good, and they have a mercenary background, but they're just dumb people. They don't know nothing about anything, but they run the world. And so, when you get right down to it, the people I've met are the guys that's going to die in the next 3 weeks of muscular dystrophy. Or the guys that we dealt last week with the cancer kids down there in Kansas City. This little boy, I like to tell this story. I'm going to tell it for the rest of my life. He's 10 years old. He was going to live maybe another month. He had no hair because he'd had chemotherapy. It was making him so sick they were going to stop the chemotherapy because it was just ruining his life. They was afraid to play him in the game. And so as the game went on, we said, well, let him stand down at third base, play third base short. So holding this bat out here like this, I could see where the ball should be pitched. And he swung at it and missed it. And a couple more swings, he whacked it out there almost to me, about 20, 30 feet. And he ran to first. He wasn't supposed to run. He ran the whole thing over to third base. He almost collapsed because he shouldn't have been running. He got no lungs.
Yeah, right. Go home.
And they let him go home.
Eddie Feigner has been all over the world showcasing his tremendous talents. In fact, he was invited to attend the United States Olympics that occurred as a representative of the Olympic team in Australia this past Olympics.
Tiger hunt. If
Oh,
he's
yeah.
doing his history, this
These
is
are-
important.
Perfect, yeah, I love it.
This is great. This is history.
When you're over there under those conditions, the guy that you operate out of is the office of the ambassador. And you have secret missions and you have secret places you're going to go because there's certain people you want to meet and you don't want anyone to know you're meeting them.
Oh, yeah.
And then you turn the information you know back to the congressional committee that's in charge of this.
Right.
And when you get through reporting, they'll say, now you reported, don't go home and blab all you know to the local people because we'll deny it anyhow. So this particular one, I'm over there in India and we've done about 5 or 6 shows, and I taught the guys that played cricket the difference between cricket and softball. And I started the India Softball Association. And they had about 600 teams that played cricket that promised they would play softball.
Oh, boy.
So the division of India and Pakistan came in 1948. And when they divided just like the Bosnia down and the Irish, they kill the other, whatever the ethnic group is bigger, kills what's left of the other. So the Indians and Pakistanis killed each other along that border. Well, finally all the Pakistanis went to Pakistan. Finally all the Hindus went over to Indians, so they stopped killing each other. Well, while this was all going on, the British government was going to turn all the routing stuff over to them. They were going to be independent. India's independent from England, even though England basically had owned them for 400 or 500 years. So one of the steps that the Indian people asked for was all of the land back. Well, to do that, the British Crown had to take all the land back from the Maharajas. So the Maharajas had a written free title to millions of acres. So they abolished the office of Maharaja, except for one. He owned 1/5 of India. And he wasn't about to not be the Maharaja. Well, this guy that owns all of the land on the top 1/5 of India, that whole thing up there, beautiful trees, and the Bengal tigers come from there and so on. He sent word to the ambassador that they were going to have a tiger hunt, and that they wanted to have the ambassador come over because he was going to politic the ambassador about different things. And so the ambassador said, I don't want to talk to him. He says, he's going to put me in a position I don't have an answer. So you go and represent me. So I went over like I was told to do, and I went over there, and they got this 5 or 6 elephants out, and the guide explained to me that we're going to ride out in the jungle, and you're going to get off these elephants, and you're going to be in a little tree house, and they're going to kill a goat, or at least wound it, down below, tie it up with a stake, and the tiger is going to be in the area because we have 16 miles circle with natives, and they're closing a circle around this tree, and they know that there's some tigers in that circle. Well, when the tiger comes over to kill the goat, you don't say a thing, you don't move, don't make a sound, because the tiger will jump and run away. So they can smell you for a mile, and they hear anything. So I know, okay. So during the night, we got to talking different things. He says, now, in the morning, the tiger, the tiger came in and tried to take the goat away, tried to kill it, and did kill it. But he couldn't take it away because it was nailed to the ground. Well, all tigers drink their, wash their food before they eat it. So the tiger's going to take it down to the creek and wash it. I guess they don't like the blood. Anyhow, the tiger couldn't get it off the stake, so he sneaks off back in the brush. The guy says, now in the morning at daybreak, he's going to sneak back in here and try to take that goat away. When he doesn't, he'll finally settle down because he's been hungry all night. He's going to settle down and eat the goat. And when he's quiet and his head's still, he'll put a bullet right between the top of his head. Point blank, like this.
Yep.
I said, I wouldn't do that for $1 million. I said, I wouldn't kill that tiger that way for nothing. I would kill a tiger who was charging at me and jump in the air and I'd shoot him. I'd do that. But I said, I'd never kill that tiger.
Good for you.
You talk about people getting upset. They put me on an elephant, sent me back down to the thing, and my stuff was sitting on the road outside, and a really dirty letter was sent to the ambassador for sending that ungrateful American out there. But for what it was worth, that was true. I mean, I can't even hit a deer when it's in full run. If it's, you know, it was helpless.
That's it.
If I was going to go kill a deer, it would be because I was hungry. I was going to eat it.
Sure.
And just to kill something because it's there to kill, I can't stand it. And then to have a pot shot at it, just point blank, just...
That's...
Anyhow, that's like...
Doubtful that anyone who fantasized...
About 800 players.
An era when the major leagues didn't, one minor league was special. Most league had team, and in many ways was a West Coast.
He was a good ball player.
Chuck was the first baseman for the Hollywood baseball minor league team, and a Hollywood producer said, "You look like a big cowboy on the western with a hat on." And he says, "No, I don't know nothing about anything. I don't want to be an actor." And I said, "Well, you'll pay you $5,000 a week." "Well, what'll I do?" He says, "We're going to call it the Rifleman."
Or tell him about Neil Diamond.
Yeah. Well, Neil Diamond is the same story. When you meet a guy that's just getting started, like Bing Crosby or Andy Williams, I knew those guys before they were who they are. And Andy Williams started out singing with his brothers. He was a quartet. And who was it? What was I going to say? I lost it.
Neil Diamond.
Right.
Oh, Neil Diamond. We're down at spring training. We just always went down to Florida spring training in February before the major league started, because once they started, the ballparks would take. But we would actually work out before, and we would play around Florida because all of the Canadian snowbirds were down there, and we'd draw big crowds in cities that didn't have minor league. This particular time that I was down there,
I know the stories run together, dear. We're talking about
Neil Diamond.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, Neil Diamond, and we're at the motel at Congress Inn there in Tampa, and we are staying for about 5 or 6 days in this same motel, and we're going to St. Pete, and we're going down in Tampa and so on. So we're going to be there for a week. Well, Pete Rose is there in his first year trying out for the baseball. He and his wife are there in that same hotel, and a guy in the lounge, there's a bar in this side here, and the guy in the lounge was sitting over in that corner up on a stool, and he could turn over here and play the piano, and he could play the guitar, and he would sing. And there was about 8 couples in the room. Well, he sang. It's about 9:30, 10 o'clock, because we'd already played our game and came back. There should be quite a crowd. There was nobody there. And so after he got through singing, he came walking in, and I said, "Can I buy you a drink?" He said, "No, I don't drink. I'll have some lemonade or whatever, water." And I said, "Boy, you have a really a great voice." And I said, the way you sing a song is so different." And he says, "Yeah." He says, "The people haven't caught on to it yet."
No, then he asked you, "Well, what do you think of what I do?"
Yeah. And I told him that I thought he was terrific. And he said, well, thank you. My name is Neil Diamond.
Oh my gosh.
Mantle achieved a rare triple crown in fabulous fashion. As soon as he came up to the majors in 1951, it was clear that this farm boy from Commerce, Oklahoma, was something special. Mantle had all the tools in abundance. He could run, field, throw, but most of all, he could hit. Man, could he hit. His first 5 years in New York were outstanding, and then in 1956, Mickey Mantle put on one of the finest single-season performances in Major League history.
I think I built up to it, you know. 52, I hit 353, 54. It was just like I was just getting up there, you know. It just took me 5 years to do what they said I could do in 1951.
His Triple Crown numbers from that 56 season are absolutely mind-boggling. Listen, home runs, 52, RBIs, 130, batting average, 353.
I don't think there's any question that he may have been the greatest slugger of all time. I know this, there's probably never 1 year that one player had, like Mickey had when he won the Triple Crown, when he had over 50 home runs and hit 350 or whatever it was, and could steal bases that well and could throw and run. I don't think there's ever been a combination of sheer power and sheer speed other than Mickey Mantle.
I envied him in a way where he played on so many great teams, but Mickey was one of the great players I've ever seen, and I marveled at him, and I've always said he was the best player I ever played against. All the pain and all the problems he had with his physical, his legs being a big problem, and I just marveled at a guy who could go through all that pain and still be a tremendous player.
Mantle's injuries may have reduced his overall speed, but not his power at the plate. Mantle swings. There goes a long drive going to deep right field. It's soaring up high. It's going. It's going. It is gone. A home run for Mickey Mantle, and it almost went out of the ballpark. Mickey Mantle, for the second time in his career, has come within a few feet of becoming the first man to ever hit a ball clear out of Yankee Stadium. Mick was named American League MVP in 1956. And eventually he was inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame. But with all his brilliance, his pride and character make Mantle feel he could have accomplished even more.
I was really lucky. I played with the greatest teams in the world, so I don't really have any gripes, but I really do believe if I had another shot at it, I could do better, and that's what bugs me.
The magnificent Mickey. There's a fly ball out to right field. That ball is going, it is gone.
If you are a batter in baseball, you have seen a ball come in, a real fastball that they strike out on, goes up about 2 inches. It's just a high fastball that just rises a hill. And if you're a good pitcher, that's the one you give for the third strike, because they'll hit at the ball, and the ball just goes up enough. They all throw curves, drops, gravity is involved in baseball. Softball is just the opposite. You have to purposely throw a ball into the ground because the ball is so low to the ground. If you bring it up at any and drop it, you drop it right in the hitting zone. So for you to throw a drop like they would see in baseball would be a sucker pitch because they would just clock it. But if you throw a raise that goes about 8 inches up and in and out, I have no idea what to do with it. So the easiest guy to strike out is a major league ball player. A minor league ball player who played softball as a kid probably would have hit it. But if Mickey Mantle and DiMaggio and Williams and Babe Ruth,
Pete Rose,
they have no idea how to raise the bat above the ball. And it's not a big deal. Any good softball pitcher could have done what I did that day.
I don't think that's true. Eddie's very humble.
But anyhow,
behind his back and between his legs is pretty tough.
Oh, yeah.
But anyhow, the philosophy behind the grandeur of hitting a ball, I pitched to Mickey Mantle about 100 times and struck him out almost every time. Occasionally he hit a long fly. And he admitted he never played fast pitch when he was a young kid. I knew him ever since he was 14. And after we'd done about 10 or 15 shows together, 4 or 5 shows a day for a whole week, he started fouling it off the bottom and hitting it up in the air. So after we'd gone through this a couple of weeks, I told him, I said, Mick, you know, we ought to choreograph this thing. Why don't I just throw you 2 fast races, then I'll give you one right down the slot and you can hit it about 400 feet. The crowd will love that. Well, for the next 50, 60 days, we did that show. I would strike him out, and then he'd hit one a ton. And Mick was a good guy. He and I drank more than our share. Started off at 10 o'clock in the morning with a pitcher of screwdrivers. And by the time we got to 4 or 5 o'clock, it was a pitcher of martinis. And we did that every day for a week. And I'll see you in Kansas City next week. I saw him after we went out one night in Chicago. The Yankees were in to play the White Sox. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he had a girlfriend. And he used to chase around pretty good. His wife understood all that, and they went through the divorce, and went back together and everything. But he was the biggest thing in the world in sports, and all the girls chased him. We had this date that night, and he was drinking, right, and we all drank, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, he couldn't walk. So I put his arm over my arm, on my shoulder, and she was on the other arm, and we walked him out to the cab, and she got in the cab, and she had to take him home. And I got to thinking, they play a doubleheader tomorrow morning. I'm going to get up and see what it's like. So I got up, and here it is, 11 o'clock. Game time is at 12. He's standing there with the sun on his face like this. And Mickey always says, I'll be all right today. He says, I just got out of an hour in the shower at the steam bath. I've got my knees wrapped. It'll be all right. He went 5 for 8 in that doubleheader and 4 home runs.
Wow. What an athlete.
That's a great story.
First time I saw him, he was just a kid, and he was trying out for the Kansas City Blues minor league team. And after, we played our game first, and then the baseball game was after, like, you know. And so after the game, he came over and wanted an autograph and all that stuff. And he says, what do you think? You think I got a chance in the bigs? And I said, I think you got it made. I don't see why in the world you couldn't be up there next year. I don't think you should play shortstop. I think you should be an outfielder. Well, a year later, he's an outfielder.
Yeah.
Yes, Eddie, I know.
Played the second game against the World Championship up there. Let's pitch the game behind his back. Well, I didn't want them to tie it up with a little ground ball, so I Freestyle, one. As I told you earlier, I have arthritis and I stand still for a while, I can't still. Look back. But it worked out best that night. When I caught the ball in my glove, I kept it so that it hit his glove. He had never seen me do that before. The umpire had seen me pitch the ball, and I hadn't seen that pitch come in until he heard it. He came right out, strike three! And it caused a heck of an argument. And we thought the argument was the batter telling the umpire caught the ball, and the catcher came out laughing, and he said, seriously, you know what they're arguing about? That batter thought it was high.
This will be the last one.
Which one is this?
Elvis Presley.
All right.
Anyhow, Elvis Presley.
Who is what we've been told by the children
right.
today. They
Elvis
don't know
Presley
Elvis.
played softball when he was a young kid, and he was on the softball team that played in Tupelo.
Mm-hmm.
And this is before he went to Memphis with his mother and sang those songs with the choir and so on. This is long before Parker.
Mm-hmm.
Then we met, and he was now the star, and he was Presley and could care less about us. And we played a couple of games where he was in the Army, and he dropped by. Just a friendly face. I didn't sit around. So he got out of the Army, and that particular year, the guy that put on the game, the name of Adams, he had been a high school buddy of Elvis's.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew Kevin Wilson, who started the Holiday Inn and all that stuff. Kevin Wilson was a promoter. He used to have a crippled leg. One leg was 5 inches short of the left. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Well, Kevin Wilson put his own posters up, promoted, before he started the Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
And so Adam says, Ellie got home today. Why don't you go and see him? I said, oh, you don't want that. Well, we went over to see him. He had a girl back on the Davenport, and they were watching movies. He didn't want us to come there. We should have called. So after he did get up and say hello, I said, what do you think of those Beatles? You know, I said, that's great music. He said, if they don't stop making those claims, he said, I'm going to have to go back on tour and let them know who the king is. So in the next 15 or 20 minutes, we had small talk and so on, and he actually came to the game that night and sat in the outfield with a beard on.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Somebody pointed out to Eddie, said, look who that is out there in that car.
Yeah, looks like an old man and his wife in a shawl. That's Ellie. Anyhow, on the way out, he says, he knew I owned that little piece of business in Vegas. And he says, when you get home this fall, I'm going to be starting a tour out there in the Fremont Frontier or one of those. And he says, tell the guys that you're a guest of mine and come to the game, come to the show when they open.
Mm-hmm.
So that fall, I'm out in Las Vegas at a golf tournament, like they have at the end of the. What happened is I tried to get a ticket, and the guys, you know, you're a good friend of Elliot. You know.
Yeah, they all are.
So I went over to a guy's house. I went over to a guy's house by the name of Harold Ambler, who was the president of our company, and he had a girlfriend that was a widow of Wilbur Clark. And Wilbur Clark had the Holiday Inn, the Desert Inn,
right.
And he started the Tournament of Champions Golf. So Tony Clark had us at his house for cocktails, and Harold Ambler and I was talking. She's in the other room. And I said, boy, I sure wish I could go see Elvis Presley. I said, he told me to be his guest. But
he's the only person that Eddie would ever want to go see in public. We don't go to baseball games. Eddie doesn't go to see concerts. But this is the only man that he had respect for that he really wanted to go see.
Yeah, great.
So anyhow, Tony Clark owned Vegas. after Wilbur Clark died. When she called the pit boss, things moved. Well, she called Mo Dalitz, the Godfather, or someone else, and she came back after she hung up the phone. She says, "You take a $100 bill, hold it in your left hand, walk up the VIP side, and you got a seat." Okay. So I left, started out the front door. She says, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I don't want to go like this. I had golf stuff on. But I want to go at least clean up a little bit." She says, "You going to go over there alone?" I said, "Well," she said, "Well, can Harold and I go with you?" I said, "Sure." So we went on over. Now, this is Tony Clark. She could be anything she wanted to be, but she went with me. And Tony, and she had a woman that was living there. There were 4 of them. So we go up, got up to the top of the VIP line, and I gave this guy the $100 bill. He snapped his fingers, and through the door behind him came a guy with a table on his head, and 4 guys with chairs on their head, and the guy said, "Follow them." So I went down in front, all the way down, and I think, they're going to put that table down right in front of the microphone. So we got down there, and they didn't set the table down. He turned and went over here at the end and up the steps. He put the table down behind the curtain and the 4 chairs. And the guy says, "The waiter will come up and take your order. It's 45 minutes till game time, and you'll be fine." So after about 35 or 40 minutes, some of the band starts getting in position, and they see us sitting over there. The curtains are closed, and so finally the guy that had the drums, he was over there. You know how they do, they tune the drum, and pretty quick the curtains opened. There's still no lights on, but the curtain opened, and then some little lights came on because the band needed to see the numbers. So the guys that were in the golf tournament, that day, saw us sitting up there, and these guys catcalling us down.
"Hey, King,
Hey, King, how'd you get a seat like that?" and so on. We ordered our meal and drinks and stuff, and finally the lights lowered out there, and the announcer said, "Ladies and gentlemen, back on tour for the first time in 4 years to show who's really the king, blah, blah, blah. Elvis Presley." And a door opens right here to our right, maybe 10 feet from my right.
Right.
And he comes walking in. He's got that white thing on.
The famous white.
With the
cape.
And he walks by and he glances back down like this. He says, "Hey, King, I see you got a good seat." And so he walks out, and the show starts, and he heard these catcalls. And Anne-Marie likes me to. I don't think.
I love this one. Eddie's up there. They're having dinner. Now, the curtain is wide open, so everybody in the whole audience can see Eddie Feigner, the king, and here's the king, Elvis. And Elvis is getting tired of hearing all these catcalls, and he says, "And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to tell you that you have 2 kings in the building tonight."
All right.
So.
And that ended all the catcalls and gave Elvis a chance to carry on, but at the same time, he really appreciated Eddie and for what he's done. And I would like to point out, everybody who knows anything about Elvis always wears his shirt collar up.
Yep.
This is Elvis Presley right here. I want you to see something. Well, Eddie got it on today.
I got it.
I don't have it up last night. I don't have it starched. My husband
I
has
wore it
always
like that.
worn his shirt collars up. Golfers do that.
Yep.
And women always come up and try to put it down. And one of the things that I noticed about that, I says, "Eddie," I says, "you've worn your collars up long before that." Well, the fun part about all this between Eddie and Elvis is that name King.
Sure.
And Elvis for himself to be able to say, "We have more than one king in the building tonight, you know, there's 2 kings," gives not only a lot of respect for somebody that we admire, because he was a really good man and very religious, knew that there was a better life, is that in a lot of the news stories, Eddie is compared to Elvis Presley, the king,
Sure.
Richard Petty, Jack Nicklaus,
Frank Sinatra.
And a lot of the headlines I always read, the King will be appearing in Jamestown, New York. No, not Elvis. But for them to have known each other is real touching, and the way Elvis passed away and died because of drugs and liquor, and he took the hard road because of the life that we live. Eddie has lived this life bigger than anybody, and Elvis evidently had people who really loved him, but they didn't understand that those things were going to kill him. And my King, right here, could have gone the same way, and he did for quite a while. But he had somebody who took him by the ear, who cared about him, who was an older man, and gave him a real hard lesson in life, and sat him down and explained that, you know, if you don't change your ways, you're going to die. And we're really sorry that nobody did that for Elvis.
Who was that guy? The person who was talking is Anne Marie Feigner, Ed Feigner's wife, and the first woman to play with the King in his court in 54 years. She's a very accomplished softball player who has a unique story as to how she met and followed the King. To you, you've been involved in softball for a long period of time.
Over 30 years.
30
I'll
years.
leave while she answers that.
No, really, before you, obviously your husband and wife, there was, you played softball in a major way. What did Eddie Feigner mean throughout that period of time?
I'm one of those people that walk up and say, Eddie, you won't remember me, but when I was 9 years old, I got to see the King in Michigan. My father took me. He coached me all of my life. My dad was a great man. Loved children and loved the game of softball, knows that it brings families together. And the King in his court is a family show. So when I got to see Eddie as a child, it stuck with me, like a lot of men and people today that walk up and tell us. At the same time, I have been considered to be obsessed with the game of softball, and it's probably very true. I can't think of anything else but anything to do with the game and children, families. And so about 25 years ago, I got to meet the King. I played a game called the Duke and Duchess versus the King in his court. And at that time, I was a pitcher and a catcher. In this particular game, I caught. Well, I don't have to tell you who was the Duchess. And my biggest dream in life was to become a professional ball player. And in fact, I wanted to be the first Detroit Tiger woman player ever. And I got to grow up with Al Kaline and Lolich and Denny McClain. Denny actually came to my house, and my father got to know these guys, and I got to sit underneath the pool table when they went out after a ball game. I mean, I was right there. So throughout my life, I've done a lot of different things of running a newspaper, owning a paper, publishing, marketing, advertising, but most importantly, creating softball programs in this country where they were not available for girls. In other words, I know that the kids were just running the streets, and my kids were grown and gone, and it was important to me to help these young women, whether or not it was just to give them a good fundamental recreational avenue to get stress out or stay off of drugs, but to be good people and create good citizens. And so about after that ball game, the King gave me a T-shirt, and I was just thrilled. A good friend of mine filmed it, and God bless him, he's passed away. And that was the greatest day of my life. And like a lot of people who play the King in his court, it's a very special moment when you meet someone that is, there is no other.
Right.
He is. And as God would say, I am. Well, he is. And so I took that T-shirt and I pinned it up in my closet behind all my evening dresses. And there are days in our lives that we get a little blue and you want to look back on something and pump yourself up. Some people put music on, some people spray certain perfumes, light candles. Well, mine was to tear those dresses back and look back on the greatest day of my life. And I moved from place to place and state to state and raised my family and so forth. And about 5 years ago, Eddie and I met in Titusville. And needless to say, I brought him in to play a few games and be his booking agent. And I was working with him on publishing his book and getting the movie done and all kinds of things. And one thing led to another, and he did a game up there in Titusville. And He said, I don't know what you're doing with the rest of your life, but if you don't have anything better to do, why don't you come on the road with me? It'd be better and easier to work together instead of by phone or by email. And I said, well, I got to think about it. So a couple days later, one thing led to another, and told him, okay, I'll pack it up and come on the road. And traveling and knowing Eddie, he's my best friend. There's nobody else in the world like him. It's an honor to be with him. More women who are married, and men, but women specifically because they've been liberated, need to take a look at what makes a successful relationship. And one of those things is having respect, and not love, but respect for their other. And if they do that, and if they show that, then they'll get that in return without any doubt at all, and without expecting it. And it works both ways. And when you're married to somebody like Eddie, who gives everything and never asks for anything in return, and knowing that we have such a deep faith in God really makes our life a lot more bearable. There are days like yesterday and the day before where we really had a couple hard days, to where we would laugh and say, God's just up there laughing at us and just saying how much more can they handle. And it's an honor to be married to King. He's my best friend.
Oh, we've got to close this out. It's off after 3.
Wow.
Anne-Marie, we told George, and I think you were still there last night. Anne-Marie had no business marrying me. She had no business sticking with me when I went down. Only been with me 5 weeks. Yeah. And for an average person would say, well, I didn't intend to marry an invalid. I'm not going to go to the hospital with you on our honeymoon. I'm going home. I mean, that would have been, I would have not been angry at her for doing that.
Yeah.
And then I watched her for those first 30 days in the hospital. She wouldn't leave my side. She slept in the bed right beside me on the cot. And she wheeled me through all of my wheelchair days and taught me how to run a wheelchair, taught me how to do the things. She packs my pills. I take about a dozen different kind of pills, and it's just the thing that the doctor gives you to keep you at an even keel, because once you've got to a position like I am, the next stroke will kill me, and I have no artery going from my body up to my brain. It comes up halfway on this side, and this one now spreads up all through my face and up through my leg like this, because that artery is closed. And she waits on me hand and foot. I owe my life to her, and if I have 5 or 10 years, so be it.
20,
Oh,
25.
God has blessed you.
And when that day comes that I have to move on, I want her to be able to say that the king told me to do this, 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 and this, and this, and I'm here to do it. And I hope she takes that wooden bat and an 11.5-inch ball and our book and the how to pitch book and how to pitch tape and the memorabilia and make the estate something that is powerful, got a lot of money in it, and then go out what she really wants to do and help the girls.
And boys.
And if I have to go tomorrow, I have no regrets. And like when her dad passed away, it's hard when somebody you love passes away. I don't imagine how the people do it if they don't have faith.
Right.
But you have faith that you're going to see this guy again. And he isn't going to be a cripple. He's going to be running up and down, jumping, and don't have any ailments, no arthritis, no pain.
Yeah.
When you know that that's the future, you don't mind dying today.
Sure.
Oh, you hate to leave the ones you love, but you're going to meet them again. And if you don't realize, if you don't think this down, when you go to sleep at night, you don't remember being asleep. You go to sleep, you get up the next morning, and you're awake. Whether you was asleep an hour or 24 hours, you don't know. When you die, You don't know if you've been dead 100 years, 1,000 years, or 2,000 years. When you wake up, it's a split second after you die.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know that time span. So when I die, I'm going to see Anne Marie standing right there. It may be
Right.
it may be 100 years from now, it may be next month, but there's no time lag. When you die, the next conscious thought you have, you're going to be looking right at your maker or your friend or love or who it is.
We hope we have a chance to see you again. I don't know if they're going to cure arthritis. We had over 2,000 cures, but none of them work. Bless the people's hearts to come out and tell me this works and this works. If you have you taken this, you can take my word for it. We've taken it all, including that guy that wanted to drink a gallon of salt water every day. But I think I'm going to have my right knee replaced this winter. We hope we will have a chance to come back and play for you. Whether we do or not will be up to Anne Marie and the guys. I'm going to be out here doing the show that I did for you tonight, most of it. Maybe I don't do any pitching in the game. Thanks for bringing us in. Thank you very much. Good night.
To Eddie and Ann Feigner, we can only say thank you for sharing these extraordinary insights into your life and your magnificent barnstorming career, which has exceeded more than 55 years of entertaining millions of fans throughout the world. Thanks for the memories. Eddie Feigner died February 10th, 2007. The interview you just saw was conducted in August of 2000. I learned that a stroke in 2000, a day after he threw out the first pitch before the women's softball competition in Sydney Olympics, ended his playing career. We also noticed that he was inducted into the National Senior Softball Hall of Fame in 2000. Both these events he talked about in this interview. It seems like one of the last interviews Ed Feigner gave while an active pitcher, and one of the last events where he actually pitched was in Jamestown, N.Y. during the year 2000. We share the memories of the king in his court, Eddie Feigner, who died February 10th, 2007.
Softball started in Chicago at the Farragut Boat Club. They wrapped up a boxing glove and hit it with a broomstick handle. And slow pitch, what we now call slow pitch, was born, where the pitcher was not allowed to strike out the batter. You just let it go as if you're pitching horseshoe. So we went to what we now call softball, the 12-inch softball, but they were still not allowed to strike out the batter. With the ball being smaller, they hit it farther, so the pitcher started throwing it with more speed on it, what we call modified slow pitch. Then it went to what we call orthodox. And the pitchers were not allowed to wear a glove to hide the ball in, so to keep the batter from seeing how you held the ball, you had to have some way to cover it. Well, the pitchers that pitched orthodox would go like this. But we started throwing slingshot, and then windmill. And when we threw windmill, we threw the twist. So you really couldn't see how you held the ball. Well, by now, the game started speeding up, and we were allowed to wear a glove. And with the glove, the pitcher was able to keep the batter from seeing how you held the ball. When we would throw the ball, you keep the ball completely covered all the way through the windup. You'd have fellows that would throw windmill with one time around. Some fellows would throw it many times around. And then there was a guy that threw it this way.
Here, pitcher Eddie Feigner shows the bewildering technique with which he strikes out an average of 17 batters per game. Playing against capable 9-man teams, Feigner and his 3 teammates have won 378 games while losing only 56. Feigner says he can pitch 2 full games without throwing the same pitch twice. While barnstorming around the country, Feigner pitches every day, sometimes in both games of a doubleheader. Pity the batter who never knows when or from where the ball is coming. As if his duties on the mound weren't enough, Feigner must often cover first when a lucky batter connects. Even an outfield hit will be retrieved by the infield, which consists of a shortstop and a first baseman. They allow an average of less than 1.5 runs per game. Maybe Feigner looks like he isn't going to try a pickoff play, but watch him. Because they can't get enough teams to risk playing them, the king and his court have signed up with a 9-man team, which, as you might expect, has become a softball terror.
Hello, I'm Jack Knight, and it's been my good fortune to be part of the king and his court since 1981, and my pleasure now to be your host for this nostalgic look at the highlights of the best-loved, longest-running, most highly awarded, and truly entertaining softball exhibition shows in sports history. A story that, as Eddie said, all started on a dare. Just a few months out of service with the Marine Corps in World War II, Eddie, like other returning servicemen, was finding it difficult to get a steady job. But a good pitcher could often find a job with a company team that sponsored a competitive group, and Eddie was a very good pitcher. At one time or another, he hooked up with Grimshaw Tires and one of the better teams in the Northwest at that time, the Turling Construction Company. Early in 1946, Eddie hooked up with some fellas to play a game south of the border in Oregon. It was a rout, and after the game, the losers got to name-calling. Well, Eddie, being as boastful and cocky as he could be, said that he could play them again and beat them with only his catcher, but that they'd probably walk them both. Well, the other team dared him to put his quite valuable reputation on the line and play him with only 4 players. Well, the gauntlet having been thrown down, the king turned to 3 of his teammates to rise to the occasion. Meade Kinzer, his catcher since grade school. Mike Mielke, later dubbed the Ted Williams of softball, a shortstop, and power-hitting first baseman Kenny White. They played a few scrimmage games at the local prison to get their defenses straight and accepted the challenge. The result of that fateful game was a rout. In the stands was a promoter from Idaho. He suggested a second game over his way. Well, that game was a rout too, no surprise. Big surprise was the King's share of the gate. More money than they were making on their regular jobs. They named themselves the king and his court, and the 4 barnstormers extraordinaire were on the road. And Jerry Jones joined the team because he was the only one with a car. The first game played under the king and his court banner was booked up in Trail, British Columbia, up in Canada, by Art Masisco. He's seen here, and on the right, Fergie Ferguson. He was one of the players on the team that lost that night. Well, there were lots more games that summer, and more in 1947. 50, they had beaten the Tip Top Tailors from Toronto. who were the reigning champions at that time, and the King and his court had gained international recognition. But the King and his court was not the only team to enjoy popularity. Of course, there were the Harlem Globetrotters, the House of David baseball team, the Clowns, the Iowa Colored Ghost baseball team was one incarnation of teams with the same name. This one was managed by Rip Collins. Showboat Clay led the Harlem Clowns. And the incomparable dribbler Marcus Haynes was with the Harlem Magicians for over 30 years, and countless others. They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and so it was with the King and his court. Several teams popped up trying to capitalize on the success and popularity of the King and his court. There was a Canadian team called Prince and his Knights. There was Rosie Black. Gary West, a longtime member of the court, took a few years off for touring to go with another comedy great, Trino Palacios and the California Cuties, and later, with his own group, saw... Strike three! You're out! And another batter goes down swinging. Going from second base far in the future. But on the day after the court beat the Tip-Top Tailors at the Canadian National Exposition in 1950, scientists at the University of Windsor, Ontario...
Space. He may hit a home run for you. Then there's J.R. Feigner. If the name sounds familiar to you, it's because J.R.
Beverly Hillbilly Max Baer and Get Smart's Don Adams, Celebrities manager Leo the Lip DeRocher put Eddie in the game to pitch against an impressive lineup of major leaguers. He faced Roberto Clemente, Maury Wills,
and more powerful with his explosive presence, Danny Glover.
Thank you very much, City of Hope. And the sporting news.
As a former serviceman, they were their gear, post